Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin, eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. I got into the roundup post for you guys this week just to kind of celebrate midsummer as it comes to pass. Just 6 albums that I'm going to do a little quick overview of. Nothing too deep at this point, just with the idea of maybe getting an idea about what these albums are about, maybe if you'd like them or not, and then maybe in the future doing a little bit more dedicated post on any one of these. The first one up I have for you this week is Yes's From a Page. It's ended up being a very exciting year for Yes because not only did we have the Arc of Life album earlier this year, which is arguably a Yes album, like a parallel universe Yes, but we also have a brand new Yes album coming out. So I got so excited about that I really kind of bent my own rules and went ahead and purchased these tracks. And these tracks are really unique because they speak to kind of a lost period of Yes music. Around 2010s, before Chris Squire passed away, Yes was still performing group pretty regularly, but they were doing a lot of shows where they're playing the hits. And during this time, the lineup was different than it was than any other time in the group. There was, of course, Chris Squire on bass, Steve Howe on guitar, Alan White on drums. You also had Benoit David singing vocals, who sang vocals on A Fly From Here, and Oliver Wakeman. Now, Oliver Wakeman is a really important figure in these because he kind of came to Yes during this time with the idea of starting to brainstorm some ideas for a new album. And these 4 tracks are songs that he wrote with the intent of filling them out for a full Yes release. And there are full Yes songs. They were all recorded, full band and everything, but there's just 4 tracks of them. Now, one of them is a track that was one that he was preparing for another project with Benoit David, and he pulled the vocals off of that one and kind of did his own piano accompaniment to it. But for the most part, these are fully fleshed out Yes songs that just never have seen the light of day before. So I was pretty excited to check these out. Now, they are found normally on a big box set, of course, where Yes is playing live at Lions, a 2-disc set, and these 4 tracks. I just pulled these 4 tracks off and bought the MP3s of them. I don't know, I can't comment on the rest of the recordings. I'm just focusing in on these 4 new tracks from a page. And I gotta tell you, they're super eye-opening as Yes pieces of music and as a part of Yes history. Now, if you look back at my Arc of Life post, I kind of owe a little bit of an apology to the way that I treated Oliver Wakeman in that post. You see, for many years, I was playing this sort of fantasy football game with Yes and trying to decide what would happen if Yes went forward without any of its original members. And of course, the keyboard position in Yes is always the most volatile. And I thought about putting Oliver Wakeman in that post, but originally I was kind of reticent to just put the sons of Yes kids in Yes just because of their last names. But I got to tell you that Oliver Wakeman's writing capacity and playing capacity really shines through on these 4 tracks. And I think really he should have been one of the driving forces in pushing Yes into a new era around that time, around 2010. Now, of course, around the same time, this is when they started hooking up with Trevor Horn. They started reworking some material that ended up becoming Fly From Here. And Oliver Wakeman was kind of unceremoniously ousted from the group. And I think that was kind of a mistake because these tracks really exude a lot of very great Yes characteristics. And I kind of put them up there with a lot of really good late Yes music. It feels like it would fit right in with like Keys of Ascension, maybe even to a degree some of Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe's work, the mid-level work on that album. Great stuff. And Benoit David shines a lot on this album, more than I'd heard him shine on Fly From Here. And so does Steve Howe. Steve Howe plays beautifully on these tracks and with a kind of fire and passion that I have not heard from him in years. So I really wish that this iteration of Yes could have gone forward because it seems like Oliver Wakeman could have contributed to Yes going forward. Okay, next up is Flying Lotus's Cosmogramma. This is another album from 2010, and it's the 3rd album from Flying Lotus. And I've been circling around Flying Lotus for quite a while. I got into him a little while back whenever I first discovered Thundercat. He and Thundercat have always had kind of a close relationship. But I really took the dive whenever I watched the anime Yasuke on Netflix a while back, kind of an indulgent watch for me. But that whole project was spearheaded by him, and the music and the soundtrack specifically is all by him. And that's the part that really captured me, because I thought that show had a lot of really fantastic music moments on it that kind of pushed it out of the bounds of normal anime music. And so it made me really curious about Flying Lotus's solo catalog, which I've just been thinking about for a while. And I gotta say that Cosmogramma has gotten a lot of critical acclaim. It was the one that many people suggested, if you're gonna have one album by Flying Lotus, this is the one to get. And I have found it very enjoyable so far. A lot of ideas per square inch in this album. It's very dense in that regard. It goes from idea and idea to idea quite rapidly. It kind of recalls to me the creative energy that DJ Shadow exuded on Introducing, his really classic mid-90s album. I wouldn't say it's exactly in that same style, but it has that real sense of exploration to it, and just the joy of making great music, I think is something that Flying Lotus is showing here. That he really enjoys making this kind of music, and he has a very creative spirit that shines through on this album. Okay, next up is Onipa's We Be No Machine. This is a 2020 release from this London-based Afrofuturist group. And immediately when you listen to this album, it sort of presents itself as this sort of African hip-hop album. And there are definitely some tracks on here that recall that. There's this feeling of contemporary rap going on with it, but also quickly dissolves into sort of this Pan-African pop style. I feel a really strong West African influence on this, especially in the use of the guitar player's kind of high-life suku style that he likes to play in. But it's not strictly West African. There's also some Central African styles. There's also South African styles. And all of this is sort of reinforced by a wide variety of guest artists that come onto the album. And despite kind of having a really classic African pop rock feel to it, it also uses a very contemporary use of electronics that they use in this album. Okay, next up is Field Music's Flat White Moon. This is the 8th album by these the Brewis brothers. Field Music is made up of 2 brothers, and who are multi-instrumentalists and play a wide variety of stuff. Field Music originally was a band that was a very kind of cerebral art pop group, but they had continually been broadening their scope over the last few albums, and almost were getting into some prog music towards the last couple of albums. But I think that it's actually good on this when they backed off a little bit and kind of made something a little bit more widely accessible, a little bit more succinct pop music, but still meticulously crafted from beginning to end. It's still the kind of thing that you'd expect from Field Music. High on musical content, high on details. Now, very often when I listen to a Field Music album, there's definitely like 2 or 3 songs that stand out, that are the songs that maybe they've intended as singles, or that have just for whatever reason kind of stand out above the crowd. I don't get that so much in this album, and it's not necessarily because the album is so flat. It's not. I think that the standard for the album is very high overall, and to stand out amongst the crowd of these songs might be pretty difficult. But by and large, the album is super impressive, and because it can be listened to on many levels, it's something you can listen to in a group of people and it won't chase them away, but it's also something you could study up close and personal and find some very deeply musical ideas going on with the album. Okay, next up is Spelling's Mazy Fly. This is the 2nd album from Tia Gabrielle. She goes under the moniker Spelling, and Spelling's kind of an interesting play on words that she has with this. Of course, there's the initial, impression that you have of the act of spelling something. But also, it also seems to refer a little bit to the bewitching qualities of her music. There's a lot of atmospheric stuff going on with this album, and it's very kind of hard to pinpoint. I would kind of describe it sort of like as Portishead, but on a real kind of dark wave psychedelic tip. It's super imaginative, and it's actually very catchy, but also a little bit obtuse. And I think that what it lacks in immediate accessibility, it totally makes up for in its character. It's a very unique album, and there's a very distinct vision, I think, that Spelling is creating here. I don't think it's fully realized at this point, but I certainly think the exploration that she's taking is worth it, and I think this is a very important step along the way, because it's a distinctive album. And finally, Gabrielle, Roth, and the Mirrors, selected works 1985 to 2005. This is a compilation of music spreading off over a couple of decades that is covering the work of Gabrielle Roth and her band The Mirrors. And Gabrielle Roth is a very, very interesting figure that I'd never heard of before I discovered this recording. I actually got this recording just on the basis of what it sounded like, without knowing a whole lot about the background. But Gabrielle Roth is a dancer who had injured herself and was told that she wasn't going to be able to dance anymore, but actually had healed herself through dance, through movement. And against all odds, actually became a dance teacher and created this dance style called Five Rhythms. And it's this whole pedagogy of ecstatic, improvised dance that's intended to sort of be cathartic and almost like yogic. So although she's not a musician herself, her husband Robert Ansel is, and the two of them collaborated quite closely to create this album. Robert Ansel heads up The Mirrors, and The Mirrors is sort of a rotating collective of musicians that do this work. The music is designed to be accompaniment to this Five Rhythms dance approach that Gabrielle Roth has created. And it's cross-cultural and ultimately super mesmerizing. Now, despite covering a 20-year period, this collection is really very cohesive, and it's immediately attention-grabbing. This sort of groove-based improvisation is completely functional, I think, in the way that Gabrielle Roth intended it to be, meaning that it's supposed to accompany these sort of ecstatic dance structures that she's creating. I have a sense that it feels a little bit like some of the mid-'80s improvisations that King Crimson was getting into, especially like Industry, some of the stuff they were doing on Three of a Perfect Pair. So this is sort of a surprise hit out of nowhere, and it definitely falls into my category of soothing but not boring albums. I really enjoy listening to this album at night. It's instant mood music that's been a lot more interesting to listen to than I would have initially thought. But that's all I got this week for you guys. If you enjoyed this video or hearing about new music, please like and subscribe and then share it out with your friends. Also follow me over on Spotify. I'll be putting tracks up from this post on there, my Best of 2021 playlist. And I'll be coming at you next week with something new. Until then, I'll catch you on the flip side.